Hi guys. If you're watching this, I think it's probable that you've finished your quiz, or at least you've run out of time, and it's time to go over it. This is 10/17, 2016, and at this point we're going over the quiz. So you see, I've got the quiz displayed for you, and the first thing we do when attacking this problem is we take a look and we see what are our variables. There's two variables, land and location. These are the two things we're checking. Now the reason I'm writing them separately right now is, and then there's output, is an output, and sometimes we'll use other things for output. So you can have multiple outputs. We're going to focus on one output now. Now I want to write down what are the different values land can have. So land, we have one where we, up here, over, how do I make this? Okay, so over here we have swampy. So that's one value it can have. We also have oil as a value land can have. Okay, and that's right over, oh, come on, stop that. Okay, oil. And then another here is forest. And so we have swampy, oil, forest, and always other. Now location. The values we see with location are, come on, give me far, fancy, and inaccessible. So those, and we must not forget, so here's far, fancy, and inaccessible, and don't forget other. Okay, so now, okay, so one little trick to notice is that you multiply the number of possibilities for each of your variables, and that tells you how many lines you're going to need on your systematic list. So there are 4 possibilities for land and 4 possibilities for location, and that's going to give me 16 lines. So let's set up the systematic list now. We'll start with land, and then we'll do location, and we'll finish with output. And so my first 4 lines are going to be swampy. So we'll start with swampy, and the location will be far. And now we got to fix. If land is swampy and location is far, and that's true here, the output is cheap. Cheap. And so that takes care of the first possibility. Now, this next swampy line, the location will be fancy. Now, so the land is swampy, but the location's not far, so this and over here, this and, yeah, this and over here is not going to be true, right? Because you need both of them to be true for it to be true. So we're going to go to the else. And in the else, we see, well, if location equals fancy, and that's true. So we're going to output expensive. And we got there. Now, the next one is going to be swampy and the inaccessible. Okay, so what do we output? Well, it's not swampy and far. So it's not land is swampy, location is far. It's not, the location is not fancy, so we go into the else here. The land is not oil, it's swampy. And the land is not forest, but the location is inaccessible. So since the land location is inaccessible, this OR is true, because all you need is one of these parts to be true. So this one works. So we can output here park. And finally, let's do swampy and other. Well, it's not swampy and far. The location's not fancy. The land is not oil. The land is not forest. And the location is not inaccessible, so neither of these are true. So we go to the else, and we output cell. And so that takes care of the 4 swampy lines. Now, the next thing we're going to do, let's get this out of the way, is oil. So the land will be oil, and we'll go through all 4 locations now. Start. If it's oil and far, well, the land is not swampy, so this and is false. The location is not fancy, so we don't do that. The land is oil, so we output drill. Go away. Drill. Now let's do that again. This time we're going to do oil and not oiled and fancy. So, okay, we go back. The land is not swampy. The location is fancy. So we're going to output expensive. And that's where we stop, right? We don't go into the else. Okay, let's try another one. How about if we do oil and inaccessible? That's our next. Okay, so the land is not swampy, so this guy doesn't go. Location is not fancy. The land is oil, so we output drill. Okay, ignore this. This is the next thing we're going to work on later. We'll make it go away for now. Okay. So that's noisy, but otherwise. Okay, the last thing is oil, that is oil and other. And then we're halfway through. If it's oil and other, well, once again, we're going to go through everything and find that the land is oil, so we drill. So that takes care of our 4 oil lines. Now we're going to do forest. So we'll start with the land is forest and the location is far. So if we have forest and far, well, the land is not swampy, so even though the location is far, we don't do this. The location is not fancy, so we don't output this one. The land is not oil, so we don't do this. But the land is forest, so we output park. Now, the next thing is forest and fancy. Well, we're going to go through all of these, and we're going to hit location is fancy, output expensive, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to output expensive. Okay. The next thing we're going to do, swampy, location is far. Okay, so we're going to have land's not swampy, so we don't do that. The location's not fancy now. Oh, I forgot to write that. Forest and inaccessible. So this is the inaccessible forest. And we are going to go through this. Land's not oil. The land is forest, so we output park. Oops. We're not go to park. And finally, we do forest and other. Once again, we bounce through this guy. Not true, not true, not true. But the land is forest, and that's all we need to make the or true. So we output, once again, park. Finally, the last four is the other land. Okay. If it's other and far, well, we're not going to, this is not true. Location is not fancy. The land is not oil. The land is not forest or the location inaccessible. So we output sell. So this is another one where we output sell. If it's other and fancy, well, whenever the location is fancy, we write expensive. If it's other and inaccessible, well, we're going to go through all of these guys, and we're going to find whenever location is inaccessible, that's all we need to make this OR true, so we can output park. And finally, other is going to go through, is none of these ifs are going to be true, and we output sell. So what we end up with is 16 lines. Swampy, far, cheap. Swampy, fancy, expensive. Swampy, inaccessible, park. Swampy, other, sell. Oil, far, drill. Oil, fancy, expensive. Oil, inaccessible, drill. Oil, other, drill. Forest, far, park. Forest, fancy, expensive. Forest, inaccessible, park. Forest, other, park. Forest, far, sell. Forest, fancy, expensive. Other, inaccessible, park. Other, sell. And so that's how we do the quiz.